尊敬的各位专家、教育界的同仁们以及关心教育的朋友们，大家好，欢迎来到全球基础教育研究联盟第6届学术年会。今天上午，来自古巴、美国、日本、德国、意大利的6位教育界专家、校长和教师，将会给我们带来6场以重新定义学习为主题的精彩报告。Distinguished experts, dear colleagues and friends, welcome to the 6th Annual Conference of K-12 Education Research Association. This morning, we have 6 speeches focusing on the theme, Redefining Learning. Now, let's welcome Mr. Adebeta Vega, Middle School National Director of Ministry of Education from Cuba. He will present us a speech entitled, Cuba Education, Its Challenges and Difficulties. 首先，让我们欢迎古巴教育部中学司司长阿达尔贝托·维加先生。他报告的题目是“古巴教育的挑战与困难”。
Un saludo a todos los participantes en la conferencia. Nos complace estar con ustedes y poder socializar las buenas prácticas educativas. Soy el doctor Adalberto Revilla Vega, director nacional de la Educación Secundaria Básica de la República de Cuba, y voy a estar dando una conferencia sobre la educación cubana, retos y perspectivas. Entre las ideas que queremos compartir con ustedes, las características del sistema educativo cubano para la formación integral de nuestros niños, adolescentes y jóvenes, y la educación cubana en el contexto de la COVID-19. Para ello, en aras de cumplir también con los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, un compromiso de todas las naciones, y como plataforma la Constitución de la República y los documentos del partido, nuestro ministerio tiene como fin y objetivo, bueno, por supuesto, trabajar en función de dirigir la política del Estado y del gobierno, y por supuesto esa formación integral de nuestros niños y jóvenes que sean capaces de estar preparados para el futuro. Y por supuesto la educación cubana en Cuba está destinados los objetivos generales que componen de 7 objetivos generales que son los componentes de nuestra educación, desde la cultura política que tienen que tener nuestros estudiantes, la cultura económica y por supuesto el conocimiento de la ciencia, la técnica y la tecnología. Muy importante en estos objetivos tiene que ver con el desarrollo de las motivaciones y habilidades de nuestros estudiantes para la formación vocacional y la orientación profesional. Bueno, el sistema educativo cubano está integrado por los diferentes niveles educativos. Inicia en una primera infancia donde se acogen los estudiantes de 0 a 6 años y se estudia en 2 modalidades. La modalidad institucional, donde tenemos los estudiantes, los niños de 0 a 6 años que están en los círculos infantiles y el preescolar en la escuela primaria. Y el no institucional, que se agrupan en los programas Educa tu Hijo, que en ese programa Educa tu Hijo son atendidos por una educadora de los propios círculos infantiles. La educación primaria, donde se acogen los niños entre 7 a 11 o 12 años aproximadamente y se imparten los grados desde primer grado hasta 6º grado. La educación secundaria básica, que se atienden a los adolescentes comprendidos entre 12 y 15 años de edad y se imparten los grados 7º, 8º y el 9º grado. Una educación especial que atiende a los niños, jóvenes y adolescentes con necesidades educativas especiales. Estos 4 subsistemas o 4 niveles educativos conforman en el Ministerio de Educación una Dirección General de Educación Básica y otra Dirección General de Media Superior, donde se encuentra el preuniversitario, la educación preuniversitaria, donde en este nivel se atienden los adolescentes comprendidos de la edad de 15 a 18 años y se estudian los grados de 10º, 11º y 12º grado. Se preparan a los estudiantes para ingresar a las universidades. La enseñanza técnica profesional, que prepara a los futuros obreros en de las diferentes especialidades y ramas de la economía. La formación pedagógica que en nuestro país atiende o se forman en este nivel educativo los profesores de la educación básica, dígase los maestros de la educación la primera infancia, de la primaria y de la educación secundaria básica. Y la educación de jóvenes y adultos, que esta educación prepara y por supuesto a estos jóvenes y estos adultos que muchos son trabajadores para tener una mejor calificación, mejores conocimientos, certificar también los saberes para enfrentarse también a la vida laboral y tener mejores oportunidades para la vida. Nuestra concepción curricular es una concepción curricular también fruto del tercer perfeccionamiento del Sistema Nacional de Educación que en nuestro país a partir del 2014 se ha experimentado en todos los territorios, buscando en un currículo obligatorio y un currículo común que posteriormente estaremos conversando sobre el tema de esta concepción curricular y cuáles son los componentes que lo conforman. Pero se caracteriza por ser flexible, contextualizada y participativa. Y por supuesto, en esta característica de esta concepción curricular como centro del estudiante, donde es protagonista en todo su quehacer, en la conformación de su propio sistema de actividades. Bueno, la concepción curricular nuestra presenta o expresa el contenido y el fin de la educación cubana y por supuesto este fin y objetivo general se derivan en cada uno, fin y objetivo en cada uno de los niveles educativos y por supuesto están en consideración, están en la demanda que se establece en el país a partir de las condiciones concretas en los momentos actuales. Por supuesto, también contiene el plan de estudio de cada uno de los niveles educativos, de las disciplinas, los programas de la disciplina de diferentes asignaturas, que ha sido en este tercer perfeccionamiento en que nos encontramos en nuestro país un reto para la educación cubana, en tanto se han elaborado todos los nuevos libros, programas y libros de texto de todos los niveles educativos, dígase de la educación general. Como comentaba anteriormente, nuestra concepción curricular cuenta con un currículo común obligatorio para todo el país, es decir, para todas las instituciones educativas, y un currículo institucional, que ese currículo institucional se expresa también por componentes que tiene que ver con las actividades complementarias que se desarrollan en la escuela, los proyectos sociales y técnicos, los círculos de interés y otras actividades que sean de interés de los estudiantes. Estas actividades complementarias, los estudiantes a partir de su grupo y la participación, un tema muy importante para nosotros en Cuba, para la educación cubana, tiene que ver con la participación, pero la participación masiva también en todo lo que se hace, en la propia construcción de sus actividades, en la propia evaluación de cada una de las actividades que se conforman. Por supuesto, entonces, a partir de los intereses individuales y colectivos de nuestros estudiantes, se conforman los proyectos educativos de grupo e institucional, que es el sistema de actividades que se van a estar estableciendo en la escuela, que por supuesto este sistema de actividades tiene relación o se conforma o se desarrolla a partir de la participación de los estudiantes con un vínculo estrecho en las escuelas de la familia, la comunidad, las organizaciones, los organismos y las instituciones. Y yo creo que algo importante de esta concepción curricular que en nuestro país nosotros asumimos ya hace aproximadamente una década, tiene que ver con todos los recursos humanos y materiales que cuenta la escuela, no solamente como institución educativa, sino en todo su contexto de la comunidad y en todo lo que puede estar aportando todos los organismos y las instituciones, dígase empresas, organismos que también puedan estar trabajando o que estén ubicados donde está la escuela, con un estrecho vínculo en cada uno con los niveles educativos, que hoy nosotros le llamamos el trabajo en red, donde también se aporta, y no solamente, decía, los recursos materiales. Es muy importante que todos aquellos saberes que estén en la comunidad, con la propia familia, se puedan compartir en la escuela. Y yo creo que ha sido un elemento muy importante en cuanto a las potencialidades que pueden brindarnos todos los factores o los agentes o agencias que intervienen en la comunidad y tener como centro al estudiante, que es el protagonismo, y realmente para él es que están hechas las actividades. Bueno, como actividades todas tributan, por supuesto, al aprendizaje de nuestros estudiantes. Por eso tiene que ver con los intereses individuales de los educandos, pero además con el fin de cada uno de los grados, con el fin del nivel educativo y con los objetivos de cada uno de ellos. Muy importante en estas actividades tiene que ver con los programas complementarios de profundización en algunos contenidos de las asignaturas. Dígase, las prácticas de laboratorio en física, química, muy importante para nuestros estudiantes porque de ahí también podemos aprovechar y trabajar todo el área de la ciencia y ahí nos salen también los futuros científicos y como nivel educativo de secundaria básica, que es el que estamos presentando este sistema de actividades, tributa a un preuniversitario y a unos institutos preuniversitarios de ciencias exactas, que por supuesto los estudiantes se encargan de estudiar el área de ciencia cuando concluyen ese nivel educativo. Y ponderar desde la secundaria básica las actividades complementarias sobre la enseñanza de las ciencias naturales, yo creo que tributa también a ese conocimiento, que no es solamente el currículo, las asignaturas, sino también otras actividades, otras aristas del aprendizaje que el estudiante quiera profundizar. No solamente hablamos de las actividades complementarias en función de los contenidos de algunas disciplinas o asignaturas. Es muy importante también en este sistema de actividades todo lo relacionado con la formación vocacional y profesional de nuestros estudiantes, cómo prepararlos desde una educación secundaria básica para que el estudiante cuando concluya el 9º grado tenga la posibilidad o la opción o los saberes para poder seleccionar una especialidad, es decir, estudiar en la enseñanza técnica profesional o incorporarse a la educación preuniversitaria. Y con ese fin, en la escuela se hace un sistema de actividades de formación vocacional que lo tributa, lo rectorea el maestro en su escuela, pero lo conducen los organismos. Y ahí estamos hablando entonces del vínculo, la relación que tiene que existir en la educación con todos los organismos en nuestro país. Algo muy importante también tiene que ver con todo el sistema de actividades culturales, recreativas, de corte histórico, que estas actividades indiscutiblemente cuando el estudiante, que por cierto, la mayoría de las veces cuando vamos a una institución educativa el estudiante se va por estas actividades. Pero es sin duda alguna, estas actividades también contribuyen a su formación, en tanto tributan al conocimiento de su historia, contribuyen también a la formación y decidir también, ¿por qué no?, su futura profesión. Es muy importante también otras actividades que se desarrollan en las actividades complementarias como parte de ese currículo institucional y como parte también de los proyectos educativos de grupo e institucional. Podemos observar también cómo se han hecho círculos de interés que tiene que ver con la gastronomía, los bomberos, es decir, todos los sectores o todas las especialidades o ramas de la economía están implícitas también en el tema de la formación vocacional y la orientación profesional, para que el estudiante en estas edades se vaya proyectando su proyecto de vida o creando ya su proyecto de vida futura. En este tema de las actividades complementarias quisiéramos agradecer al país anfitrión, China, por el convenio que se firmó con la Escuela Secundaria Básica Fructuoso Rodríguez de La Habana, en la capital de Cuba, sobre un círculo de interés de la enseñanza del idioma mandarín. Este círculo de interés, por supuesto, es muy agradecido por los estudiantes porque también contribuye a uno de los objetivos de la educación que tiene que ver con el dominio de lenguas y diversos idiomas. En este círculo de interés que se creó durante el periodo de la COVID, es significativo destacar en la creación de este círculo, que bueno, ya están todos los materiales, los estudiantes, seleccionaron los estudiantes están contentos con los materiales recibidos, no se han podido concretar otras acciones debido a la propia pandemia que ha afectado no solamente a Cuba, sino todo el mundo y por supuesto al Sistema Nacional de Educación, en tanto no tenemos nuestros estudiantes presencialmente en las aulas en algunas etapas a partir de los brotes epidémicos que hemos tenido en nuestro país. Por lo tanto, nuestro agradecimiento de forma individual al país anfitrión, y no solamente él, sino también de todos los estudiantes y la familia y profesores de la secundaria básica Fructuoso Rodríguez. Comentaba anteriormente que el sistema educativo cubano en medio de la pandemia se ha tenido que crecer también, porque en Cuba a partir del 2020 hemos tenido 2 brotes de pandemia donde se han tenido que cerrar las instituciones educativas. En estos momentos estamos en un alza a pico donde los estudiantes están desde casa observando la actividad de docentes televisivos y por supuesto convirtiendo entonces los hogares en escuelas. Decirles sobre este tema, la educación en el contexto de la COVID en nuestro país, que contamos, y gracias a los recursos que hemos contado en nuestro país desde el 2001, con un canal educativo que transmite programación educativa durante todo el día, hemos podido tomar alternativas y que después voy a estar comentando algunas de las acciones que nosotros hemos estado desarrollando. No solamente el canal educativo, sino la empresa Cinesot de nuestro Ministerio de Educación, donde se han creado unas herramientas de trabajo para nuestros educandos desde las escuelas, pero en este tiempo de COVID también, como los estudiantes han podido utilizar esta herramienta desde las casas a partir de las redes sociales. Hemos podido crear también a partir de RIMED en Cuba algunos documentales, algunos materiales que nos han servido para la preparación en este tiempo de COVID. En medio de la COVID y la primera afectación de Cuba, se tuvieron que hacer adaptaciones curriculares al currículo. Nuestro currículo está diseñado para desarrollarlo en 41 semanas lectivas del curso y por supuesto se afectó el curso escolar. Por lo tanto, para poder desarrollar el curso escolar 21-22, tuvimos que adaptar ese currículo. Gracias al tercer perfeccionamiento del Sistema Nacional de Educación, nuestras universidades y los investigadores y principalmente nuestros profesores con la participación de la familia, de nuestros estudiantes, se pudo hacer las adaptaciones curriculares, que no es más que la adaptación de ese currículo a 31 semanas. Esas adaptaciones curriculares se pusieron en vigor en noviembre, cuando reinició el curso escolar. Por las afectaciones de la COVID se tuvo que interrumpir también. ¿Qué acciones nosotros hemos tenido que desarrollar y reto para la educación cubana en este momento a partir de estas afectaciones? Bueno, tuvimos que poner la actividad de docentes televisivas. Actividad de docentes televisivas en todas las asignaturas, en todos los niveles educativos. En un primer momento fueron actividades teleclases para desarrollarla desde las escuelas a partir del distanciamiento. En otro momento, y hoy estamos en pico pandémico, donde los estudiantes están en las casas, bueno, son actividades docentes televisivas donde los profesores imparten los contenidos, los explican y lo ponen actividades de tarea o trabajo independiente para la próxima semana. Todas las asignaturas del plan de estudio están en actividades docentes televisivas por la televisión, el canal educativo, se transmiten una vez a la semana y por supuesto con el apoyo de los docentes que desde ahora están trabajando en su casa y desde la escuela, hemos podido desarrollar en este periodo también y a partir de todos los recursos que tenemos, los maestros han estado interactuando con nuestros estudiantes a partir de hojas de trabajo, la comunicación constante como parte del seguimiento del diagnóstico y la ayuda individualizada que requieren nuestros estudiantes. Por lo tanto, aun cuando el curso se ha tenido que detener de forma presencial, nosotros hemos continuado el desarrollo del proceso docente educativo desde los hogares, es decir, a distancia. Eso yo creo que es algo significativo que tenemos que estar trabajando. En tiempos de pandemia ha sido una prioridad para el Ministerio de Educación la preparación permanente de los maestros y docentes, con nuevos retos, a partir de la preparación y utilizar otras vías que no eran las normales. Primeramente, utilizar también todos los recursos que hemos tenido. Cursos a distancia, las preparaciones metodológicas, ya no por disciplina, sino por grado, por grupo. Y por supuesto, se ha podido desarrollar también diferentes eventos que tiene que ver, el último que nosotros desarrollamos fue el evento de pedagogía 2021, donde fue un evento de que se desarrolló desde la propia base y los maestros pudieron socializar sus experiencias y se desarrolló a nivel nacional. Ha sido constante para el Ministerio de Educación la preparación permanente de nuestros docentes y su certificación. Es muy importante que todo este tiempo de COVID, aun cuando son cursos a distancia, se ha certificado los saberes de nuestros estudiantes, de nuestros profesores, que sin duda va a atribuir a ese conocimiento y a esa preparación de nuestros estudiantes para la vida y cumplir con el fin de la educación, la preparación integral de nuestros educandos. Agradecer la posibilidad de compartir este espacio con ustedes. Todavía la educación tiene muchos retos por delante. No quedan muchos caminos por trillar, no quedan muchas cosas por hacer, pero creo que vamos por un camino correcto y trabajar. Y por supuesto que este evento va a contribuir sin duda a perfeccionar el trabajo de cada uno de los países participantes en cuanto se socialicen las buenas prácticas educativas de cada uno de los países. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Adelbeta Vega, for your sharing about the Cuba education system and the online programs during the pandemic. 非常感谢阿达尔贝托司长分享的古巴教育体系以及疫情期间古巴教育系统所做的努力。Next, let's welcome Mr. Marcos, Principal for Oskaloosa Community School District from our United States. He will share with us their story of perseverance through the pandemic. 接下来，让我们欢迎美国艾奥瓦州奥斯卡路萨学区校长马克·斯科尔斯先生，他将与大家分享疫情中的坚守。
Well, greetings to each and every one of you. My name is Mark Scholes, and this is my story. I would like to begin my presentation today by offering my sincerest of thanks to each of you for the work that you do to ensure our youth around the world are provided with opportunities to learn and grow socially, emotionally, and academically. Through these unprecedented times, if it wasn't for your visionary acts of leadership and out-of-the-box thinking, who knows where the current state of education would be? And more importantly, who knows where our students would be from a perspective of learning? I would personally like to thank the Global Education Research Association for their invitation to speak at this year's conference. It is truly a joy and an honor to present to you on this year's conference theme of redefining learning and how hard work, creativity, and positivity allowed for a middle school in Southeast Iowa to persevere through challenges presented by the pandemic over the past year and a half. One of the common expressions that I would mutter to my administration, staff, parents, and students when questioned about how things were going in order to navigate the challenges presented before us during this time was, "We got this," because at no point did I feel like we were not going to persevere through whatever challenge came before me or my instructional team. I vividly remember when the news came to us that all schools across the state of Iowa were shutting down in March of 2020. I remember this because we were having a middle school assembly to recognize our students for their academic and extracurricular achievements earned over the course of the second trimester of the 2019-20 school year, just before our week-long spring break holiday. It was maybe an hour after the assembly was over when our students had already been dismissed for the day that the sad news came to us that all schools would be closed across the state of Iowa until further notice due to the pandemic. Remaining optimistic, we truly felt that this might be the case maybe for the next week or two, but we did not realize at that moment in time that we would not see students physically back in our building for the remainder of the 2019-20 school year. As that reality of students not being back in the building began to sink in, I look back at the remarkable work that was done across my school district and not only accepting that reality, but in the way in which our school district responded to the reality that we were presented with. I appreciated the attitude that our administrative leadership team embraced at the onset of our school closure and the solution-focused mindset they came to work with every day, which I felt was also paired with our teaching staff as they navigated the various challenges before them as this unprecedented event unfolded. Being a one-to-one school, meaning each student in our building is provided with an electronic device for learning both in and out of the classroom, and that's through a Google Chromebook. We at Oskaloosa Middle School were very fortunate when the school closure occurred, in the sense that we knew each of our students still had a way of communicating with and learning from our teachers. The initial school closure period of time was set to last until April 10th, approximately 3 weeks after the initial declaration of the school closures across the state of Iowa. However, we quickly learned as April 10th approached that school would not be reopening and that we may be looking at a shutdown for the remainder of the school year. As those days crept up, we were also planning for that possibility. Administration from each building in our community worked to complete a plan for student learning during what came to be known as the hiatus. A foundational learning plan was developed that was communicated to the teachers and staff at the middle school with the understanding that we could not require our students to complete the learning that was presented before them, as attendance during the initial stages of the pandemic was not required due to equitable access to learning across the district and state. Weekly learning opportunities were presented to students by their teachers in coordination so that a specific content area of focus took place each day of the week. For example, Tuesday would always be the day for learning in the area of math, and Wednesday would always be the day for learning in the area of science. The plan that was created allowed for my staff to truly begin utilizing ways to connect with students beyond the classroom through online platforms, including Zoom and Google Meet. The plan was created also called for my staff to begin collaborating with each other remotely. The seeds for the very essence of this year's theme of redefining learning had its own seeds sown during this time. As the final weeks of the 2019-20 school year came to an end, we were very proud of the work that was done to create a primitive platform for remote learning and provided us with the learning and the opportunity to vow to be prepared should this reality continue into the 2020-21 school year. In preparation for the 2020-21 school year, school districts across the state of Iowa worked tirelessly to put together what the state of Iowa called a return to learn plan, a requirement from the Iowa Department of Education in order for each school district across the state to successfully reopen its doors to students. This was no exception to Oskaloosa Community School District. The return to learn plan that we created provided an overview of what learning would look like for students in our district and buildings in 3 different learning scenarios, all contingent upon what COVID-19 positivity rates look like in our community and individual school buildings. The first and most ideal scenario was face-to-face learning, where all students would physically be in our building. The second scenario would be a hybrid learning platform, where half of our students would physically be in our building one day, and the other half of our students would be learning from home, existing on a rotational basis that was established. The third scenario would be 100% online learning, with all students learning from home. The district's return to learn plan had to include strategies for implementing for the following components with fidelity: leadership, infrastructure, health and safety, Iowa academic standards, social, emotional, behavioral health, and equity before we could reopen our doors for the 2020-21 school year. Committees were formed from personnel across all levels of the district in order to address and create a plan for each component of the Return to Learn plan for our district, balanced with representation from each learning center on each committee. Committees gathered frequently throughout the summer in order to prepare adequately for our students' return to learn. It was very satisfying and refreshing to see the buy-in and level of involvement put forth by our teachers and staff over the course of that summer, especially when the summer months in the United States are defined as a break from the teaching environment. When the summer came to an end, the diligence of our school district personnel paid off, as our Return to Learn plan was approved by the state of Iowa, and then we would be able to focus on our students coming back to us. Many contributing factors, I believed, paid massive dividends to the middle school that I administer in successfully completing the 2020-21 school year, which I would like to focus the remainder of my presentation on for you today. I will be focusing on the sound foundation that we established through various initiatives and programs created, the buy-in that we were able to formulate from various populations, and how a single culminating event saw the embodiment of these many efforts manifest this past year. Perseverance through these identified focus areas has enabled us to truly redefine what learning looks like at Oskaloosa Middle School. Having a solid foundation in any industry is key to experiencing success, and education is no substitute or exception to that rule. We knew heading into the 2020-21 school year that without a solid foundation of initiatives, protocols, and systems, it would be very difficult to achieve success with our students and our parents. You may wonder why I add parents in this process. Well, I include parents in this equation as well because we view our parents as valuable partners in helping educate our youth and believe that they play a large part in carrying out our building's defined why. Our why that we established for the 2020-21 school year was that we believe all students deserve a world-class education, and they need us now more than ever. This was our mantra throughout the school year, and we stood by it through thick and thin. Now, the steps that we took in creating our Return to Learn plan were vital, but I felt like there were some very specific foundational initiatives within the Return to Learn plan that we at the middle school pursued in order to set our building up for success this past school year. The first initiative that I am extremely proud of that we continued to emphasize throughout the year was our building's focus on social, emotional, behavioral health. We believe that academics are very important, but we also recognize at the middle and intermediate levels that a student's social and emotional well-being is tantamount to their academic success and abilities. We believe in teaching and reaching the whole child, academically, socially, and emotionally. Therefore, one of the protocols and systems that we instituted at the middle school with social, emotional, behavioral health in mind was a daily advisory class. The class was designed to purposefully expose our students to the 5 core competencies affiliated with social emotional learning, also known as SEL. Straight from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, the 5 core competencies that we strove to incorporate each day in advisory class included self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Lessons to help our students in these critical areas derived from several resources that we found of value, including the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens by Sean Covey, and curriculum provided by a program that we found called Choose Love. Prior to the start of the 2020-21 school year, lessons were put together with the assistance of administration, guidance counselors, and a newly created ad hoc committee composed of several teaching staff in my building whose strengths included background, understanding, and interest in the area of social emotional learning and wellness. Each day during advisory, emphasis was placed on one or more of the 5 core competencies so that students would receive a balance of instruction, hitting on all 5 of the core competencies over a set period of time. When determining what part of the day to have advisory class, it was obvious to me that the best time of day to have this class would be at the onset of every school day, as I could not imagine a better way for an adolescent to learn their day, or to start their day, than to learn about the ways to essentially have a great day and learn about ways to apply one or more of the 5 core competencies throughout the remainder of that child's day. Lessons were brief, but powerful, as advisory class last year took place over a 25-minute period of time from 8:10 until 8:35 a.m. each morning. Students remained in the same advisory class throughout the entire year, creating a condition where the student would make the greatest connections with their assigned teacher and classmates for this class. To us, this small investment of time focusing on a child's social and emotional well-being was minuscule in comparison to the academic and behavioral outcomes that we were confident we could achieve with the remainder of the minutes allocated to us throughout the school day. A second system and program that was instituted in our building at the middle school that has made a large impact in the overall social emotional well-being of our students has been our Student Success Program, consisting of 2 student success coaches whose background in behavioral interventions and social emotional behavioral health has resulted in fewer office disciplinary referrals, an increase in restorative justice practices, and an increase in positive connections and relationships with all students in our building, including students that would identify as at risk due to conditions in their lives that have led them to fall into that category. An example of that might be a single parent household or a low socioeconomic status household. Rather than always reporting to the office for minor disciplinary infractions in the past, the role that the Student Success Program played allowed for the success coaches in our building to respond to minor offenses that could be easily and proactively addressed and corrected just outside the classroom door, rather than occupying greater periods of time and resources in the administrative office. Additionally, students took greater ownership in their behaviors that they were exhibiting by taking part in restorative justice practices that were facilitated by our student success coaches. Students were given opportunities to rectify situations in which their behaviors affected their peers' ability to learn and feel safe. Called restorative justice circles, students whose behavior hurt others were given the opportunity to rejoin their classmates after going back into the classroom, to sit in a circle and listen to their peers discuss how their learning was impacted by the choices made by the student committing the offense. The opportunity was also given to the student committing the offense to make amends with a large group and teacher prior to their learning. Establishing themselves as advocates for student success and support, the student success coaches in our building took the time at the beginning of the year to clearly outline their goal and role with teachers and students so that there was no confusion about the responsibilities that they have in the building. Building trust and relationships with students is the #1 priority for our student success coaches. And even though they play a role where they intervene when behaviors are exhibited, students ultimately understand that the success coaches are truly there to help them grow socially, emotionally, and academically. The tandem of a daily advisory and a student success program have allowed us to bring out the best in our students and create situations and a learning environment for the most ideal of outcomes. We at Oskaloosa Middle School have embraced the notion that students do not care how much we as teachers know until they know how much we as teachers care, and that connections always come before content, and the proof is in the pudding. As a result of instituting both our daily advisory class and our student success program, we saw a drastic decline in disciplinary issues in our building. Office disciplinary referrals went from 448 to 222 within a year's time, a more than 50% decline, leading to students being in the classroom more to receive additional instructional minutes. Having a reliable system in place if and when COVID positivity rates in our building would put us in a position to transition into a different mode of learning was also crucial to establish heading into the 2020-21 school year. Knowing that 3 different learning platforms were absolute possibilities going into the 2020-21 school year, it was imperative that a plan be ready to roll out that would be more efficient than the primitive learning platform that was created at the end of the 2019-20 school year. However, without the primitive platform that we created at that time, I don't believe we would have been able to create a better, more robust method for students to receive instruction in either a hybrid or 100% online format. The 2020-21 school year rolled out, and when our numbers were very good as far as positive COVID-19 cases were concerned, allowing us to stay in face-to-face learning. Mitigation strategies were put in place to help ensure that positive COVID-19 rates were down. Face masks were required to be worn by both students and staff. Frequent hand washing and sanitation of desks and classrooms took place on a period-by-period basis. Physical distancing was instituted both in the classroom and also in our cafeteria. By doing this, when we had students or staff test positive for COVID-19, the damage was minimal, as the mitigation efforts that we embraced only resulted in limited numbers of students needing to quarantine when and if they were exposed to another student or staff member that had tested positive for COVID-19. Months into the school year went by and we remained in face-to-face learning. However, as the month of November of 2020 continued to unfold, we saw our numbers of positive COVID-19 cases creep up into our building, or in our building. Luckily, because of the careful planning and consideration that we took into account at the onset of the school year, a plan was ready to roll out when the decision was made that we would be going to a hybrid learning platform from November 19th of 2020 until December 4th of 2020, roughly a 2-week period of time. Refining the original platform that was created at the end of the 2019-20 school year, we were able to roll out an updated grid that proved to be most effective in allowing students to be able to access learning during this stretch of time. By going into a hybrid learning model, what essentially happened was that we had half of our students in face-to-face learning one day, while having the remaining half of our students in online learning. And then that would flip-flop the next day. Before the school year had started, students were designated as either part of the silver group or the maroon group. The schedule for hybrid learning identified which days the maroon and silver groups would be face-to-face and the days that they would be engaged in online learning from home. We were able to continue, as a result of this, to have advisory class each day, never losing sight of our social emotional learning focus. Teachers provided Zoom links in order for students at home to be able to log in and be part of the learning the same way in which the students physically in the building were able to do so, promoting equitable learning opportunities for all of our students. After the 2-week hybrid learning timeframe came to an end, we were happy to report that we had a 90% attendance rate overall during this time. Positive COVID-19 rates continued to go down in our building, and then we were able to return to face-to-face learning for the remainder of the 2020-21 school year. I think about the other districts in Iowa and across the United States that were unable to do this last year. And it really makes me appreciate all the instruction that we were able to provide to our students, minimizing gaps in learning that I believe would have happened if we were not able to physically remain open in our classrooms this past year. The next section of my presentation will focus on the importance of the buy-in that needed to occur from amongst various constituencies that had a hand in the learning outcomes of our students for the 2020-21 school year, and the role that buy-in played in helping redefine learning at Oskaloosa Middle School. Having the belief and support of those around you when trying to institute anything new can be challenging even in the best of times. Trying to do this in the middle of a pandemic is even more challenging. However, through effective, transparent communication and support, my students, staff, and parents showed tremendous buy-in as we navigated the difficult waters of the 2020-21 school year. Though it may appear that adolescents are not reliant upon leadership and consistency when it comes to school from their administration and staff, they truly are. When the pandemic hit in the spring of 2020, it became absolutely clear that our students were more reliant upon us than ever before. It ultimately led to me forming the conclusion that the why in what we did for the 2020-21 school year had to somehow involve the notion that our students need us now more than ever before. A sense of order that came from health mitigation strategies that we incorporated may not have always been outwardly and openly appreciated vocally, but deep down, each student did appreciate the consistency with the expectations that we held with regard to wearing face masks, washing hands, and keeping their distance from their peers during this stretch. Did we have to remind our students of this from time to time? Of course we did, but there was never much feedback given once students were redirected to do so, confirming the acceptance of this guidance being provided. Leadership and consistency in the form of communication to our students was also supreme. Incorporating daily announcements in the form of videos each day by members of our leadership team provided reminders about safety and measures being taken when it came to our building having to transfer to hybrid learning and what they looked like, for example. You never expect to receive much email correspondence from students as an administrator, as the majority of the email that I receive comes from staff and from parents. But I was actually very proud of our students this past year, taking the time to advocate for themselves by emailing me when they had questions about logging into Zoom during hybrid learning, or how to access an assignment on Google Classroom from their teachers. Students felt comfortable approaching me, and that was very gratifying to me as a building principal. Securing buy-in from my staff was also equally important. Without the support of your staff when it comes to incorporating new initiatives in a school is like sending a boat full of holes into open water. You are not going to get anywhere, and you are not going to achieve any form of success. I attribute a lot of the success that we had as a building during the 2020-21 school year to the impressive school leadership team that I was fortunate enough to recruit and get to work with this past year. Membership from the school leadership team consisted of a representative from each of my core content areas. So that included reading, math, science, social studies, writing, special education, and also Encore. Additionally, I was allowed to have a handful of at-large members serve on this committee as well. Ultimately, the full complement of membership on the committee possessed various skill sets that matched perfectly with the various goals and initiatives that I wanted to achieve as a building this past year. The goals and initiatives that we had established for the 2020-21 school year centered around social, emotional, behavioral health, quality instruction plans, effective co-teaching practices, and a robust multi-tiered system of supports for students needing interventions in the areas of reading and math. After the members of my school leadership team were chosen and were assigned to an initiative to focus on, I also trained my school leadership team members on how to effectively recruit a team so that our initiatives could be pursued with fidelity throughout the 2020-21 school year. Ad hoc committees derived from each initiative that we set for the year, led by a specific school leadership team member with anywhere from 2 to 8 teachers serving on each respective ad hoc committee. The beautiful part about each ad hoc committee this past year was that once the objective of the initiative was completed, the subcommittee was considered done, allowing for a new subcommittee to form so that the next objective towards the initiative overall could be worked on with a different set of teachers, keeping the scenery fresh throughout the school year for our staff. Another item that I believe attributed to a great deal of buy-in from my staff this past year was the level of communication that they were provided with throughout the year. Not only was significant information passed on to my staff through the leaders of my school leadership team, but I also provided my staff with weekly newsletters that highlighted significant pieces of information that were considered vital to their success in the classroom with our students, centered on our building initiatives. And you can click on these various links that you can see here, and it's also provided, they're both also provided to you at the conclusion of this presentation that has been shared with you on a resources page. The last group whose buy-in was absolutely necessary came from our parent constituency. During a pandemic or time of crisis, providing reassurance to families and parents that their children are going to be fine is absolutely critical. Establishing trust amongst parents had to take place this last year, so obtaining their buy-in was naturally part of the process. My mantra when it comes to working with parents is that you can never communicate enough with them, as they would rather be over-communicated with than under-communicated with, and have questions remaining about something you're trying to do that may affect the well-being of their child. From the beginning of last school year, we provided daily announcements to our students and also to our parents through our building website that was updated on a daily basis. I also provided a monthly principal newsletter to parents that they could access through our building's website, highlighting activities that unfolded during the previous month and things that they could expect in the month to come, all tied to our building initiatives for the school year. When the portion of our school year hit, when we had to announce that we were going to be going to a hybrid learning model, communication and transparency again proved to be vital for parents to buy into what we wanted to do for our students and to the help that we needed from them in making sure that the students at home were accessing their work as expected. The video link for parents that you see on this page was an example of that. Parents responded to the call and were tremendously supportive in what we were trying to do in rolling out our hybrid model of learning. This was very affirming to me in the effort to obtain buy-in from our parents during the last school year. You may ask how capturing buy-in from students, staff, and parents ties to the theme of redefining learning. It's a fair question. The answer to the question can be attributed to the fact that there was an increase in the ownership on the part of all three parties and not just students with respect to learning, especially when it came to the elevated level of learning leadership on the part of all of our teachers in my building when it came to incorporating professional development around the established initiatives for the 2020-21 school year for their colleagues. The final portion of my presentation today will focus on a culminating event that represented the various measures that we instituted over the course of the 2020-21 school year, reaffirming our quest to redefine what learning means at Oskaloosa Middle School. We as educators emphasize the importance of feedback in the learning process for our students so that they may improve in the mastery of their skills within a specific content area. Feedback is also vital to our success as administrators and teachers in our pursuit of excellence in leading our organizations and classrooms. I will spend this portion of my presentation discussing how the many efforts that we put forth over the course of the 2020-21 school year manifested in a culminating event in our building, encapsulating the very idea of what it means to redefine learning and persevere through the challenges presented by the pandemic. Feedback and data from our students, parents, and staff helped affirm many of the action steps that we took last year to provide a safe and positive learning environment for our students. One of the ideas that we incorporated last year to allow students to put more ownership in their learning came through our implementation of student-led parent-teacher conferences. Involving the student, parent, and the teacher simultaneously, the idea behind student-led parent-teacher conferences was for students to be able to take evidence from their work towards a particular learning priority standard, to be able to explain the progression of their knowledge and mastery toward the standard in the presence of their parent, with the meeting and conference being facilitated by their advisory teacher. I did not speak about this story previously in my presentation because I believe it represents the very essence of what it means to redefine learning, culminating all of our action steps previously discussed in this presentation. So much work went into incorporating student-led conferences. It all started with our teaching staff and their commitment to excellence and overall improvement. At the end of the 2019-20 school year, our district made the decision to change the way in which we graded students in each of our classes, or their classes. We as a district instituted what is known as standards-based grading, and our district refers to this as standards-based learning and reporting, where each student would be assessed on their skill level as defined by each priority standard identified within each specific content area. We wanted our students to be able to not only learn the content presented before them, but more importantly, we wanted them to be able to apply the skill associated with each priority standard and retain that skill moving into the ensuing grade level. Doing this also helped align the curriculum across each content area from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. Our teachers rolled up their sleeves and spent considerable time collaborating with each other to make sure that their priority standards were well defined and that their assessments were clear when it came to measuring their students' knowledge and skills towards each priority standard. Proficiency scales were developed by our teachers to help outline what students needed to be able to do in order to be considered proficient in each of the priority standards as defined by each respective content area. Those in turn were shared with students in order for them to understand what they needed to do in order to be considered proficient towards each standard, allowing for realistic goal setting to take place on the part of the students. Once this initiative was determined at the end of the 2019-20 school year, and teachers created the pieces to make standards-based grading possible, we needed to be able to find a spotlight or an event where students would be able to showcase their understanding and application of this concept in a meaningful way. Looking at the tools and resources that I had available in my building going into the 2020-21 school year, I thought that this called for the assistance and expertise of one of my ad hoc committees at the middle school. The dedication and devotion of my ad hoc committee that was committed to seeing this component of our quality instruction initiative shine will always be revered by me as one of our greatest moments in revolutionizing the learning process. Since our COVID measures put in place did not allow for parents to physically be in our building during the 2020-21 school year, we had to get creative when it came to conducting our typical parent-teacher conferences. Our ad hoc committee saw an opportunity with this to involve our students more in the process of our existing conference model. And what better way for students to get involved in the process than to have them talk about their own progression of learning when it came to our newly incorporated standards-based learning model. It was determined that students would lead their conference with their parent by presenting and discussing evidence, demonstrating their progression towards proficiency for a specific priority standard in their class, with the advisory teacher helping facilitate the conference. Held twice a year, once in early October and then again in April. A great deal of effort went into making sure that our conference model would be ready to roll out in October, with roughly 9 weeks of school under our belt by that point in the school year. It was decided that advisory teachers would serve as the home base for conducting student-led conferences because, as was mentioned previously during this presentation, our advisory teachers in essence spent the most considerable amount of time with our students, emphasizing and reinforcing their social, emotional, behavioral health needs. This would generate comfort and confidence, we believe, for our students being asked to lead a discussion with their parents and teacher over progress that they were making in their classes. My teaching staff needed to be trained on the model for conferences we would be instituting and the role they played in the facilitation process and assurance that students would have adequate evidence to present during conferences as well, which members of the ad hoc team were able to deliver with fidelity. The platform, in order to conduct the conferences, had to be reliable and simple enough for our teachers and for our parents to be able to navigate in order for our conferences to go well. Ultimately, we use Zoom as the platform for our students and parents to be able to meet with the advisory teachers to host each conference. Parents were sent a link through email that allowed for them to click on the link to go straight to the meeting with the advisory teacher. We also used a program called Sign Up Genius that allowed for parents to sign up for a particular time slot to meet with the advisory teacher prior to the Zoom link being sent. This ensured that a specified time was established that would not be interrupted between the teacher, student, and parent on Zoom. Communication leading up to the conferences was also very crucial so that parents could understand what was happening and what was coming their way several weeks before the conferences themselves took place. Letters and electronic communication were sent on the part of administration and advisory teachers to parents to let them know about conferences and the conference structure for the year. In the past, a parent would simply show up on conference night and would navigate around the building to visit with each teacher that their child had, lasting several hours in many cases. Parents would have to wait outside of classrooms to see their child's teacher, waiting for the previous parent to end their conference with the teacher in the room. Teachers would relay information about how the parent's child was doing in their class so that students had no ownership in the discussion process that was taking place about them, essentially, and their own learning. Conducting conferences in this new format was definitely a risk, and I knew that it was, but I also thought it was a safe risk, knowing that providing an opportunity and forum for our students to speak about their own learning and progress in a safe environment that was time protected was what was best for students, which is really the very purpose of school. The data would prove this to be a risk worth taking. In the fall of 2020, we had 80% of our parents attend student-led parent-teacher conferences. Just a year before, we only had 49.7% of our parents participate in fall conferences, which was really a standard for years prior as well. Ultimately, we saw a 30% increase in the level of participation amongst our parent population at the middle school in just a year's time. Spring conferences generally saw even less participation in the past from our parents, but this past spring, I'm happy to report that we had a 75.4% of our parents participate in student-led parent-teacher conferences, compared to just 31% participation just a year prior, seeing a close to 45% jump in participation again in just a year's time, led myself and other leaders in our building and district to form the conclusion that instituting student-led parent-teacher conferences was a sound decision and an event that we wanted to stick with for years to come. Ultimately, if it were not for the creation of an advisory class teamed with a building focus on social emotional learning and a clear path to our educational delivery system that required buy-in from students, parents, staff alike, none of this would have ever been possible. This is why I am very proud of the attendance and participation data that was collected during our student-led parent-teacher conferences this past year. I believe that it reaffirmed our commitment to teaching and reaching our youth and served as a great example of what it means to redefine learning and persevere through a pandemic. I would like to thank each of you for taking the time to listen to my presentation today. Like you, I share a passion for children and their educational well-being. It is my sincere hope that you are able to take a few things away from my presentation that you may be able to incorporate somehow in your organization in the future. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to present to you today, and I wish each of you an absolutely spectacular school year where your students, teachers, and staff have the opportunity to live their best lives. Remember, you got this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I like your idea that we view our parents as valuable partners in helping educate our youth and believe they play a large part in carrying out our building's defined why. 我们把家长视为珍贵的伙伴，他们可以以学校共同帮助教育青少年成长，并在实施学校教育的理念中扮演重要的角色。谢谢你，马克，您的观点真的让我们感同身受。接下来，让我们有请日本长野市教育委员会学校教育科主管小泉一树先生，他的报告题目是面向全体激发学生内动力的课程。Now let's welcome Mr. Kazuki Koizumi, Supervisor of School Education Division, Nagano City Board of Education from Japan.
First of all, I'd like to appreciate of giving me to have the opportunity to tell you about my idea. My name is Kazuki Koizumi, a supervisor of Nagano City Board of Education in Nagano Prefecture in Japan. Nagano is almost the center part of Japan. Anyway, the title of my speech is Inspire the Students, the Curriculum to Support Each Student. I will introduce my career first. After my graduation of the university, I started my career as a junior high school teacher from 2003. Through 18 years, I have taught English for junior high students at 5 schools. In Japan, it is usual that we teachers change the school every 3 or 4 years. From 2010, I worked at Shinshu University Faculty of Education Junior High School. That was my first turning point for thinking about the way of teaching English. Also, from 12-17 to be the opening staff as Ichiritsu Nagano Junior High School, which was just started as a new all-through school, was the second big turning point for my life. I am going to tell you about them after all. From this April, I have been the supervisor of Nagano City Board of Education. Today, I am going to tell you about the things you see on the table of contents. Before that, I think the most important thing in teaching as a teacher is to inspire the students. If the students have the interest for the thing they are learning, he or she learn by themselves. If the student feels fun for learning, he or she cannot help getting involved in inquiry of studying English. I want to tell you about my idea for them, the introduction, the situation of all through schools in Nagano, and the relationships between them. What we value the most is not to provide integrated education, but to understand children well from various aspects and develop education that suits them. I am going to tell you my titles again. First, the situation of all through schools in Japan. Second, the program for growing children in Nagano. Nagano Prefecture. 3, the curriculum in Shinano Elementary and Junior. Shinano Elementary and Junior is one of the schools in Nagano Prefecture. And also the curriculum in Ichiritsu Nagano Junior and High School that I worked at. 4, from my experience, to know the learning styles. And finally, I'm going to tell you about to inspire the children. First, I'm going to tell you about the situation of all through schools in Japan. Originally, Japan has the system of 4 years for education of kids and teenagers. We have some patterns about the all through schools in our school systems. These days, there are many schools which has 9 years curriculum with elementary for junior high and senior high. Even in Japan, the number of systems that monitor the growth of children through integrated education is increasing. I'll talk about 2 examples of these systems later. In my city, Nagano City, we want to raise independent children by the age of 18 when they graduate from high school. There are about 80 public elementary and junior high schools in Nagano City. So, of course, not all of them have integrated education. However, as a city, we are thinking of providing education throughout the city with such sorts. This slide shows about 9 years curriculum and 6 years examples and 12 years as Nagano City does. Okay, I am going to tell you about the program for growing children in Nagano. This is called Shinanoki Plan. Shinanoki is the symbol trees, the name of symbol tree in Nagano. Nagano City has formulated the above-mentioned measures for raising independent children and has made them known to all the cities. Originally, in 2015, this curriculum was made for improving academic ability of all children. This curriculum is a 9-year plan with 3 years and 3 terms, and is currently in the 3rd term, first year. Excuse me. In the 2nd term from 2018, in order to raise independent children, a curriculum that emphasizes the connection between schools, such as cooperation between kindergartens, nursery schools, and elementary schools, cooperation between elementary schools and junior high schools, and cooperation between junior high schools and high schools. This slide shows the model of Shinanoki Plan. You can see the raising story of the children. As I mentioned earlier, we are currently in the third term, and as a measure to raise independent children, we have set a cultivation of qualifications and abilities for self-study. We believe that if the children get or acquire those kind of abilities, they can grow up by themselves. This slide shows the model image of the third term. Next, I am going to tell you about the curriculum in Shinano Elementary and Junior. This school is a little special in Nagano City. Introducing the characteristic schools among the elementary and junior high schools in Nagano. This is the curriculum of Shinano Elementary School and Junior High. In Japan, consistent elementary and junior high school usually consists of a 6-year elementary school period and a 3-year junior high school period. However, Shinano Elementary and Junior High School has a 4-year elementary school stage and a 5-year junior high school stage. This will facilitate interaction between elementary school and junior high school and will enable children to move to junior high school life without stress. In particular, 5th and 6th grade students have adopted a subject-teacher system so that they can study subjects quickly and professionally. As you know, in Japan, usually in junior high school, we have a subject-teacher system, but in elementary school, we usually do the homeroom teacher system. In addition to that, we have adopted a grade teacher system so we can raise children from various aspects and perspectives. These days, this grade teacher system increasing step by step. This slide shows the curriculum in Shinano Elementary and Junior. Also, you can see the stream of the life of the kids in Shinano Elementary and Junior. Alright, next I will introduce an example of a junior high and senior high school integrated school. It is called Ichiritsu Nagano Junior High. I had worked at this school for 4 years until this March. This school divides 6 years of junior high and senior high into 3 steps every 2 years. Here, we are trying to make the connection from junior high school to high school smoothly. The school has a comprehensive study time program that allows students to explore what they want to pursue. So the students in this school can choose their topic of inquiry and they can do researches or some surveys as they like. And not only are junior high school and high school students in teaching interacting in their daily lives, but junior high school and high school teachers are also able to interact with each other and watch over the children's growth over the past 6 years. To tell the truth, I am a teacher of junior high school, but at that Nagano Junior High and Senior High, we usually teach also high school students and junior high school students. And for high school teachers, vice versa. These days, many children, many kids in elementary school want to take an exam for this new type of junior and senior high. Okay, now let's talk about from a slightly different perspective. In 2014, I had the opportunity to receive training in the United States. I stayed 3 weeks in Montana State, and also I stayed 6 weeks in Florida, in the United States. I had a training program at Montana State University, and I knew 2 kinds of viewpoint of observing children. One is that each learner has an advantage. The other is about multiple intelligences. Let me look at the slide. At upper part, we have 3 types of learning styles of students: auditory learners, visual learners, tactile learners. Before I knew about this knowledge, I didn't observe my children like this perspective. But after this, I could observe my students from many aspects, and I could find a lot of good scene of the students. This part shows the 7 multiple intelligences presented by Dr. Howard Gardner. From verbal linguistics to music rhythmic. This is the other type of learning styles. So we teachers should know, I think, about these kinds of varieties of learning styles of the students. In fact, in Nagano, it is normal to study lessons with 1 child students. This is rare in Japan, but the basis of all ideas is to observe the children from various angles and to watch their growth, including all aspects of learning and living. I think and I believe Nagano Prefecture, Nagano City, has the very precious viewpoint of observing students' growth. Finally, I am going to tell you about to inspire the children. We teachers usually think about we need to teach something to the students, or we teachers think we have to tell something to the students. But I think the most important thing in education is to see the child, to observe the child, connect the information, and have the child grow with many aspects. Get to know the child well at the elementary school stage. At the junior high school stage, you will be able to know the child, share the child's information, and watch the growth. As you move into high school, you will be able to develop your child's goodness, attract interest, and watch over his growth and inquiry. As I said before, in Japan, especially in Nagano, teachers change their schools 3 or 4 years. So we need to share the information about the students, and we need to grow them up with the relationships among the parents, teachers, people around the school, and all the people concerning with the students. To inspire the students, I think the most needed point is to be with them, see from many viewpoints, and run the life with the students. All through schools enroll of the important part of this way. Thank you very much for listening. That's all for my speech.
Thank you, Mr. Kazuki Koizumi, for your sharing of the programs and the curriculum to support and inspire each child. I was really moved by the words, the most important thing in education is to see the child, to observe the child, share and connect information, and have the child grow with many aspects. 教育最重要的一点是观察学生，看清学生的状况，共享观察结果，帮助学生全面发展。谢谢小泉一树先生精彩的报告，我们受益匪浅。下面有请来自德国慕尼黑巴伐利亚科学院研究管理员本杰明·舍尔菲尔德先生。本杰明博士曾在2018年在室外工作半年，回国后继续为推动中德教育合作与交流而努力。面对前所未有的挑战，本杰明博士提出了应对未来的思考和方法，那就是让世界为明天做好准备。Now let's welcome Mr. Benjamin Schoenfeld, Research Administrator of Bavarian Academy of Science, Munich from Germany. In 2018, Dr. Benjamin worked in Shijiazhuang Foreign Language Education Group for half a year. After he came back, he continued to work to develop educational exchange and communications between China and Germany. He will present us a speech entitled Thoughts and Approaches for a Future, Preparing the World for Tomorrow. Welcome.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, first of all, please allow me to express my gratitude for inviting me to this conference and for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on the topic of our conference called Redefining Learning with you. I am very pleased to take part in this conference. The event offers a great platform to gather experiences, ideas and concepts from many different countries around the world, to bring them into conversation with each other and to inspire and learn from one another. I'm sure that all participants of this conference have set themselves the goal to empower students, upcoming young generations, as well as learners in this world through better learning systems, more efficient learning infrastructures and training methods. In addition, we want to help each other to provide our teachers the best possible conditions. In my opinion, China is ideally suited to host such an important international meeting, not only because of its exceptional methods for teaching values, but also because of its position in the world. Let us therefore take the Chinese proverb, learning is like rowing against the current. Once you stop, you drift back, as a basis for learning from one another and developing clever and advanced new paths together. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Benjamin Oskar Schönfeld. I live in Munich and work here in the capital of Bavaria and the third largest city in the Federal Republic of Germany. I studied medieval history as well as modern and contemporary history and political science at the Ludwig-Maximilian-Universität in Munich. After 3 years more studying and working as a research assistant at the LMU, I received the degree of a Doctor of Philosophy in subjects medieval history and auxiliary historical sciences. In 2018, I had the pleasure to work for 6 months as a German teacher at the Chicago Foreign Language School, where I taught students in 7th, 8th, 10th and 11th grade. I'm very glad that we have maintained our good connection over the years. I would be happy if it stays that way in the future. I always supported the school's motto, preparing the world for tomorrow. In my point of view, it represents and expresses the mission of all participants of this conference very accurately. After my return to Germany, I worked as a parliamentary policy advisor for social employment and youth policy at the Bavarian State Parliament. These days, I work as an administrator for research and as a special advisor of the General Secretary of the Bavarian Academy of Science in Munich, Germany. I'm also working as a lecturer at the Governmental Bavarian School for Public Administration, where I teach constitutional law and political history, as well as at the Historical Department of the LMU Munich. I am happy to see you all in good health, especially after these difficult last 2 years, during which our lives were dominated by the coronavirus. In Germany, the coronavirus had severe effects on our children's everyday school life. Between March 2020 and September 2021, kindergartens, schools and universities in Germany closed because of the pandemic for almost 18 months. During this time, when homeschooling was the only way of teaching, parents, teachers and above all students, but also the government, were faced with major and previously unknown challenges. Joint learning in the class, community with peers, direct contact with teachers, but also school trips, project days and school enrollment celebrations for our school beginners were severely restricted or not possible at all for a long time. Only recently, they are becoming part of our everyday school life again. What we learned from this was to embrace the challenging situation as an opportunity. In my opinion, it underlines, strengthens and promotes a development that we should shape actively, sustainably and strategically. The question of how to reach students and their families via an electronic device and the necessity of organizing, shaping and designing forms of teaching online made us reflect on the future and establishing teaching methods. For this reason, the current situation and challenges are the following. How should we, how can we, and how must we learn and help others learn in the future? We have to approach these questions from different perspectives and consider different phenomena. At this point, please allow me to take a brief look at selected areas. Of course, I will keep my elaboration concise, as it otherwise would go beyond the scope of this speech. The digital transformation is profoundly changing our society and our work environments. In our educational institutions, in educational policy and in society, however, we still lack an inadequate understanding of how digital media and tools have fundamentally changed and will continue to change learning processes. For years, experts in education encourage us to transform how we conceive of and define learning. I believe it is overdue to adopt a radically new understanding of learning, new learning. The learning environment has changed very little for an extraordinarily long time. Classrooms in the 1980s were not that different from those that existed 100 years earlier. And the experience made by the students often reflected that. However, technology is shaping and transforming the educational landscape, and many schools are taking this opportunity to redefine learning environments of the students. The most successful schools reflect a culture of learning, encouraging it across the whole school. Innovative pedagogical practices, together with a high levels of student engagement and independent learning, help to advance students' learning outcomes. Research suggests that these high-performing schools demonstrate, first of all, an ability to provide continuity and stability in the learning experience, facilitating student progress and success, both at home and in the classroom. Secondly, a high level of student engagement, with students being empowered to take control of their learning process. Thirdly, an ongoing monitoring of student experience with both teachers and students using this information to evaluate outcomes and identify strategy for success. These are not unusual goals for a school. Please let me elaborate on possible steps teachers and leaders can take to deliver a modern learning experience that is in line with the experience of their students elsewhere in their daily lives. I will refer to examples from German schools, in particular schools in Bavaria. A. First of all, teachers and leaders must open their hearts and minds for a new learning styles. New learning is cooperative, situated, competence-orientated, and data-intelligent. Digital and traditional teaching and learning formats work together throughout the entire educational journey. New learning increases learners' self-determination and focuses on their individual needs. It is inclusive and puts the goal of equal opportunities for all students into practice. It promotes media competence and data literacy, thereby enabling participation and self-determination in a digital society. B. Teachers and leaders must go forward instead of falling back. As I mentioned before, the coronavirus crisis has made it very clear that there is a need for laptops and smartphones, video conferencing, tools for collaborative work, study apps. All the things that once seemed merely convenient suddenly became real necessities to continue teaching and learning at all. Until now, teaching with digital media was driven forward by a few individuals or pioneers. Now we are all becoming familiar with new practices and creative teaching and learning formats. We should see this as a starting point for a future of learning, not just a temporary emergency solution. This does not mean saying goodbye to personal interaction or proven in-person teaching formats. Rather, we must appropriately anchor digital transformation in the educational sector as both an opportunity and a social requirement. A return to an old status quo in learning culture would be equivalent to giving up in the face of these challenges. C. Teachers and leaders must see digital tools more than just technology. We are facing a number of challenges. Schools, universities, and other educational institutions are not just lacking necessary technical infrastructure. What they lack most is experience and expertise on how to teach, learn, and work online, and how to productively blend digital and in-person forms of teaching and learning. Rethinking learning thus encompasses far more than digital technology. Yes, it needs new infrastructure, new learning platforms, and new technologies. Equally necessary are concepts of hybrid teaching and learning, sustainable and cooperative forms of organizations in schools and other educational institutions, and innovative policies to support learning. D. Teachers and leaders must acknowledge the fact that before a new work must be a new learning. For teachers, the need for continuing education to accompany this transformation is immense. But this holds true for all other professions as well. We have to familiarize ourselves with new forms of learning. The digital transformation affects the entire working world. Work and learning have become inseparable. The changes in how we work, that is, new work, require changes in how we learn, and that is, new learning. New corporate cultures and concepts of work require new concepts of learning. Agile, cooperative, and networked work requires agile, cooperative, and network learning. The opportunity and willingness to engage in lifelong learning are important foundations for the success of these transformational processes. I therefore see a great opportunity to focus learning and teaching more on acquiring skills, on methods such as making students memorize content, something we practice for many years in the sector of dual education in Germany, where we combine the system of conveying practical contents in factories or companies with theoretical learning material in vocational schools. I am very glad that several countries around the world are interested in adopting this system. To my delight, China and Germany carve out ways for cooperation and collaboration pertaining to this topic. The digital transformation has made it an important step for the future for us to focus on necessary action competencies and capacities of acting. For example, digital transformation software, the translation software makes contacts with other cultures more easy. At the same time, we should pay far more attention to teaching intercultural skills in the future. E. Teachers and leaders should welcome the chance to shape the digital transformation of society. New learning empowers people to understand and actively participate in shaping the transformation of society and the corporate world. This is not a matter of merely adapting to technological and economic demands. Instead, new ways of learning aim to foster skills such as the ability to learn together cooperatively, to be proactive, and to interact with digital realities in a self-reflective manner. In this process, new learning puts learners into focus and empowers to pursue self-directed lifelong learning within the digital reality of modern life. We should take advantage of these opportunities. Learners should learn to learn on their own, learn how to learn and how to collaborate in groups. They should learn as early as possible to decide for themselves what they want to learn. They should learn to decide which content and skills they need and which questions to ask. Project work, group work, information booths in the classroom, where learners can explore topics themselves, can be suitable methods for this. And teachers can learn by redefining the role too. Being a presenter, they can increasingly transition to perform a coach for their students, as the instructions and explanations are much more focused on the individual. F, and finally, teachers and leaders should be courageous to adopt a new way of learning. Now is the time to develop concepts and guidelines for a new way of learning. This is the only way to harness the potential of technology to create a future with equal opportunities for all and to enable people to live fulfilled lives in a digital society. New learning offers the enormous opportunity for people to shape and to participate in transformation processes throughout the whole society. For this reason, Germany aims to establish new learning as a social consensus across boundaries of individual institutions or political jurisdictions. The drastic experiences resulting especially from the corona crisis allows us to draw far-reaching conclusions and to purposefully align the educational policy agenda. In our days, education experiences a learning renaissance. Educators witness a disruptive convergence of access to mobile devices, online content, demand for choice, and increased access to high-speed bandwidth. Our new reality includes the fact that teachers are everywhere, content is the king, and students are increasingly expected to learn in an anytime, anywhere model. To be clear, this isn't about our schools being broken. This paradigm shift is more about redefining our learning, which will result in a redesign of our schools. Meaning, to design learner-centered classrooms, we need to begin our design thinking from a student lens. This includes tackling through issues like time, mastery, and student agency. As lead learners, we are faced with the challenge of remaining connected to the ways students' learning is occurring. Today's learner is increasingly interested in applying their learning to real-world scenarios, which will drive student engagement, agency, and skill development. The new normal for learning is to become non-linear, where students are able to demonstrate proficiency across content areas and in a variety of settings. One of the greatest challenges facing educators is the need to tackle time, meaning embracing the belief that time is a variable and learning is the constant. How can we truly personalize learning when we have been so unwilling to be flexible with the amount of time it takes to demonstrate mastery? If a student has the ability to demonstrate proficiency across competencies, why would we hold them back from advancing at their place? Likewise, if a student is struggling and requires additional time, why would we push them forward unprepared for the next level of learning? We can all agree that children are unique. Each is blessed with their own personalities, gifts, and talents. Yet, our traditional learning model was built to advance students in a cohortal model and based upon the year they were born in the grade level they are assigned. As leaders, one of our greatest challenges is to create flexibility in time, where students are able to advance based upon mastery while remaining connected to their cohort to support socialization, emotional learning, and relationships. In Bavaria, we are reaching a tipping point of our schools. Now is the time to embrace the opportunity to create a new model of learning for our kids, to being intentional so truly make learning personal for every child, every day. Finally, I will end with words from Irene Grudwell, who said, "I realize if you can change a classroom, if you can change a community, and if you change enough communities, you can change the world. By cooperating in designing the future of learning and teaching, we achieve the future of preparing the world for tomorrow." Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Benjamin. New learning increases learners' self-determination and focuses on their individual needs. It is inclusive and puts the goal of equal opportunities for all students into practice. 刚才本杰明博士提出的新学习，以学生个人需求为重点，提高了学习者的自主权。它的包容性把所有学生机会均等这一目标变成了现实。希望大家在自己的教学中去实践和验证。Now let's welcome the last speaker of the academic forum, Mr. Brian Griggs, Assistant Principal of Hagley Unified School District from Arizona, United States. He will share with us their experience and resources in helping students by shifting their focus from what was taught to what was learned in the past 2 years. 最后，让我们欢迎美国亚利桑那州黑格里学区副校长布莱恩·格里戈斯先生，他将与大家分享从教什么转移到学什么的实践经验。
Hello, my name is Brian Griggs, and I'm the proud assistant principal at Coronado Elementary School in the Hagley Unified School District, which is in the state of Arizona, United States of America. Today, I will be talking about helping students by shifting our focus from what was taught to what was learned. I will be sharing anecdotes and a few resources that can hopefully help you as you lead your schools and school districts. I know that as an educational leader, the past 2 years have been challenging, so the more we can help each other out, the better. I look forward to the day when we can stand in the same room again. It is in a time of crisis when a person's true beliefs come to the surface. Ideal statements and well-wishing aphorisms cannot hold up under the pressure of difficult circumstances and an unforeseeable future. Like many in attendance at this conference, as an educator, the past 2 years have challenged who I am and what I really stand for. It is with this in mind that I can truly say without hesitation how thankful I am for the team of educators that I work alongside at Coronado Elementary School and within the Hagley Unified School District in Arizona. Never before have I seen a more dedicated or skilled group of people willing to do what it takes to ensure that students receive the world-class education that we would desire for our own children. In sharing our story, my hope is that I can encourage you in your journey to serve kids, as I am sure that hearing your stories will encourage me. We saw success by focusing on learning, relying more on structured collaboration, and adhering to a vision that inspires action. During the course of a normal school year, there are always challenges. We search for ways to effectively motivate students. We help them navigate peer conflicts. We actively partner with families in the education of their child. We provide extracurricular activities so students can pursue their interests. We ensure the safety of our students from the moment they step on the bus in the morning to the moment they cross the threshold of their home in the afternoon. For many students, we interact with them for more hours out of the day than their families do, and yet we realize that parents are their first teachers. It is an immense responsibility placed on the shoulders of our faculty and staff, as well as for school and district leaders. That is in a normal school year. I know that I am not alone in that 2020 and 2021 were not normal school years. Full disclosure, I was very naive when I first heard about the pandemic in early 2020. To be fair, I would wager that many of us at this conference had little to no experience leading a school through a global pandemic. Thankfully, a mentor of mine years ago had emphasized that a school leader's main job is to put the right people with kids each day. This advice helped me to lead our students and staff through difficult, uncharted waters. I am not a health professional, but I have a stellar health aide. I am not an expert in cleaning chemicals, but I have one of the hardest working building foremen in the state. I had to be chief learner, and for this I also need to make sure that I say thank you to our head principal, Jeff Armstrong. When he models what it is to be a chief learner, that is him, and so I am immensely thankful for his leadership as well. I could not be an expert in everything. My job was to listen, learn, and help people connect the dots. When March 2020 hit, much was unknown, but this much was true. Coronado had the best team, and yes, I do recognize my bias, focused on caring for students and making sure that they learned. We would make it. But what did learning look like? To focus on learning means to base instruction on the standards, skills, and learning targets to be achieved during the course of a lesson and instructional unit. This should come as no surprise, and yet we found in March 2020 that we had to look again at what our state standards are. Projects of the past would not necessarily translate to online instruction. We could not simply do what we've always done, just online. That would not work. In the state of Arizona in the United States, we have a set of state-adopted standards that every public school must teach students to mastery every year. At our school, we have kindergarten students, usually students who are 5 to 6 years old, all the way up to 6th grade, students who are 11 or 12 years old and looking forward to junior high and high school. Within those standards are major clusters and supporting clusters. For example, a major cluster in 3rd grade is to represent and solve problems involving whole number multiplication and division. That is a big skill to accomplish. That standard then is broken down into 4 other skills, one of which is to interpret products of whole numbers as the total number of objects in equal groups. So that gives you an idea of some of the state standards and how they're worded in Arizona. We also are a dual language immersion school where 50% of the day is in Mandarin and 50% of the day is in English. We utilize a team of 2 teachers, a Mandarin teacher and an English teacher, to teach different disciplines in their respective languages. These teachers teach the state standards and have the added component of utilizing the American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Languages World Readiness Standards. Major goal areas include the 5 C's: communication, cultures, connections, comparisons, and communities. Later in this talk, you will get a chance to see our 3rd grade teaching team discuss a common formative assessment on the specific mathematics skill mentioned earlier. You will be able to see our regular teachers as well as our Mandarin dual language immersion teachers working together in collaboration. The conversation that you will see occurred during quarter 1 of our current school year in 2021. So what you will see is collaboration from a team that had to teach remotely for the first time ever in March 2020, start a school year remotely in July 2020, return to in-person instruction for a large fraction of our students in September of 2020, and start quarter 1 July 2021, this school year, completely in person. This team navigated those circumstances professionally and with an admirable amount of skill and perseverance. With their discussion, it revolves around a common formative assessment. It is a common assessment because all 4 teachers work to develop it. They share instructional strategies and the results and find ways to work with all 4 groups of students. It is a formative assessment in that it helps teachers and students see what they know and help decide which next steps to take. The activity that they are discussing can be used both for in-person and remote instruction, and I hope that it can be a beneficial practice for you. One key component of the discussion revolves around defining what the learning target is and how students can demonstrate proficiency. This is a simple refinement in theory, but in practice means a strong commitment to our values. We are shifting from a focus on what is taught to a focus on what was learned. If you look at the state standards for 3rd grade in Arizona, there are many skills to be taught, many worthy concepts to pursue. But if students do not actually learn what was taught, what was the point? Again, we had to ask ourselves, if this was my own child sitting in the physical classroom or on the video meeting screen, would I be okay with the teacher giving up on my student learning that skill? This shift was not without its challenges. Classroom formats and student attendance impacted student learning. For the classroom format in March 2020, we used Microsoft Teams as the basis of our remote instruction platform. Our district had already implemented Office 365, and it was a logical next step. We found that it was beneficial in recording lessons for students who might have missed during what would have been regular school hours. What we had trouble with in Teams was the reporting of grades, communicating out the learning that was happening. Attendance when online was challenging. We thankfully have a great informational technology, our IT department in Higley, that was able to deploy computers and cellular internet hotspots to whichever student was in need. So it was not directly an issue of access with the attendance issues that we had. What we found was that students struggled with motivation towards the end of April and May. May is our normal end of the school year, and many students in a normal school year would already be looking forward to summer vacation. This was compounded by the danger of not showing up to their online classes, even in the start of July 2020 school year. So even as we were ready to start a school year, students were struggling to attend. There was the very real possibility of learning loss. We could have blamed the students. They were the ones not showing up after all. But it is our job to ensure that students learn. We are the adults. We are the educators. We are the ones with the worthy mission. If the learning loss was left unaddressed, those deficits and gaps would only widen. This became a question of equity for us. One thing was predictable. The world our students would inherit would be highly unpredictable. Our students now, more than ever, needed the tools to succeed. If deficits were left unaddressed, we were setting students up for failure, not just in the current school year or even at the secondary school level, but in life. We were not okay with that. Even as we returned to in-person learning, attendance was a factor to consider. We want our students to be safe. One of our mitigation strategies is that students stay home if they're sick. Because we are asking them to stay home, absences are not penalized. We transitioned away from Microsoft Teams and have implemented Instructure's Canvas learning platform. Teachers are able to upload lessons for specific students if they are absent. There is also a beneficial commons area within Canvas where teachers can share ideas for increased collaboration. While we provide resources for students to catch up if they miss school, where we have seen the most benefit is through our small group instruction. Small group instruction has been a part of the model of instruction at Coronado for years, but it is during the past 2 years where we have seen it be a non-negotiable, not just for school leaders, but for teachers as well. It is protected time. Each classroom has a U-shaped table to provide a designated space where teachers can interact with 5 students or less about specific learning targets. To address learning loss, teachers use shorter, more frequent formative assessments to help guide their instruction and to have purposeful conversations with students. We still do quarterly benchmark assessments on progress throughout the year, but many times students need help now, not just in a few weeks. We also use this time and this structure for enrichment. We do not limit students to a basic understanding of a skill, but instead utilize resources from our gifted and talented coach and our district office to challenge students further. Our district shows its support by providing opportunities for any teacher to receive an additional teaching credential for gifted and talented instruction at no cost to the teacher. We use the philosophy of train the trainer, so we have a sustainable line of teachers willing to learn and help others do the same. Our small group instruction is fueled by the collaboration of our educators. Ensuring student learning in the modern day is a complex scenario, requiring more inquiry. We had to stay curious for the benefit of our students, families, and each other. There was no comfort zone. No one had led a school or taught through a pandemic before. If there was a perfect way, then everyone would have been doing it. This is where I must give a tremendous amount of credit to our principal, Jeff Armstrong. He is a role model for that learning and excels at asking questions. Thankfully, we had collaborative structures and purposes already in place. We had something to build on instead of trying to create a completely new reality. Each teaching team has a shared planning period during the course of the day. It is time that is blocked off and protected. Every Thursday, the expectation is for teaching teams to meet together to discuss which skills are essential for the current lesson and unit of instruction. To determine how they will assess student proficiency and how they will respond depending on student levels. These conversations are different than determining who will have recess duty on which day or trying to troubleshoot a specific student's behavior, although those are important as well. For more information on collaborative meetings, I highly recommend the work of Solution Tree with regards to professional learning communities. Once a month, the collaborative meeting also involves the administration team, our literacy coach, and our gifted coach. We look at how students are doing on common formative assessments and discuss strategies and resources to help students master skills. We look to get to the root cause of student misconceptions and not just treat surface symptoms. When we discuss student proficiency, we go beyond they have it or they don't, and add an additional layer differentiating a basic understanding and true mastery. Earlier, I mentioned a third grade mathematics standard. The goal of the standard, as set by the state, is to get students to understand multiplication at a fundamental level. You will get a glimpse of the third grade team in action. As you watch, listen for the back and forth exchange of ideas revolving around the skill and strategies to help reinforce the skill. Imagine yourself in the collaborative meeting and what questions you would ask. You are surrounded by educators who care about kids and are willing to do what it takes to help students learn. On the table, you will see a paper with a colored stair step on it. This is a one-page graphic of our promise standards, and each step represents a grade level skill that we promise the next grade level that our students will master. You will also hear the words retrieval practice and brain dump. This year, we have been adding to our instructional toolbox by doing a campus-wide book study of powerful teaching by Dr. Pooja Arwal and Dr. Patrice Bain. I highly recommend it as an easy-to-read study and on how to increase long-term retention of ideas and skills for students.
So we're going to assess them on their ability to interpret products of whole numbers using their different strategies. So we kind of decided we were going to do the MAT, where they
model each of the different strategies that we practiced. So equal groups, repeat addition, arrays, strip diagrams.
And solving 9, 10, 6, so kind of a higher number, 2 higher factors. And then they'll need to complete all of them in order to get the bonus. Because the test is mostly over just using the models, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they have to see an array and create an equation. They have to create or find the product out of some groups of something.
Mm-hmm. They have to draw out an array for a given multiplication problem.
Yeah. This will echo very well with what they normally do with brain dump, like what is multiplication, and this is a reflection of how much they still know.
Yes.
Absolutely, it's a good retrieval practice, especially with a higher number, that they're not focusing on, okay, 2 times 3, they're actually having to apply, we know how to do this for the lower numbers, now let's apply it to some higher numbers.
And echoing off of that, it's challenging enough that it's not something that they're tempted to just be like, oh, I know this is memorized and I'm not going to put in effort into it. They're getting that actual practice on something that is challenging. Yeah.
So we're gonna encourage every kid to do this, right?
Yes.
So everybody can do this, and then
I tell them it's optional, but then for some of them they say, do I have to do it? I say, yes, you have to do it.
I tell them it's on the computer card and then they have to staple it to the back of their test, so that way it is there, it's on their test, it prompts them to, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to try for that one.
Yeah, and long term that just fixes their mind into the mindset of like all these bonus opportunities, all these options, go for them, go for them, go for them.
I don't know if you guys do it too, but I'll let this bump their score also. So if they scored a 2 and they were
Like
1 point off,
bonus
this would bump them to a 3.
I do the
that's
same
good.
thing.
That's good.
Or 2 to a 1 or something.
Yeah, I do that also in the ELA side. Like if they're able to create the grammar or the writing or the skill in their own way, I'll take that as evidence of mastery. So.
Some kids want to do more, so maybe on the back they could even create their own problem.
Yeah, and then create their own
that.
map to their problems. So just
Right
recreate
there,
this.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then it's a full-on creation
I
problem.
could see some of them doing like 12 times 12 and
Yes.
trying to solve that out.
I've already had a student do 12 times 12.
Oh my
So
goodness.
They made an array for it and everything.
And word problem, maybe they can also.
They could also create a word problem based off.
So I like that.
Yeah, and leaving it open-ended of like gives the student the ability to do it at their pace, at their level, with their mind, with their perspective, their unique perspective.
Another structure that we have in place at Coronado Elementary and within the Higley Unified School District is our intervention planning team. If you are familiar with the concept of a multi-tiered system of supports, it is that without a specific trademarked program associated with it. With our intervention planning team, teachers and administrators work together to track student progress, create targeted interventions for students, and to see whether those interventions help or not. We use many research-based strategies and track progress over time to help inform our educational decisions. As we came back to in-person, we knew that the learning gaps would be present. We built teacher efficacy by putting those intervention tools in the hands of classroom teachers and made up for lost time. We then zeroed in on our intervention efforts for those students who needed additional support and beyond the general education classroom. In the United States, if a student has a learning disability, they are eligible for special education, a modification of the curriculum or educational program. We wanted to make sure that the students with learning disabilities were not confused with students who were simply absent or struggled online. We also understood that a student with a learning disability could also have been truant. Again, we wanted to make sure that we got to the root cause of student learning difficulties. We didn't want to create more problems down the road for students. Our teachers worked tirelessly to provide support for students and work as a team to get students the individualized help that they needed. Our vision for student learning helped keep us on track. A strong vision motivates for movement, helps paint a picture of where we could be. A strong vision helps remind us of our why of what we do. As researcher Simon Sinek has repeated in multiple venues, we need to know the why before the what or the how. It inspires us to something beyond ourselves. The vision for Coronado Elementary is to ensure a premier education that enables all students to enter middle school and succeed at high academic and social emotional levels. Higley, our district as a whole, adds to that the desire to have students impacting our world. This is who we are and where we are going. Stories help shape who we are and remind us of our vision. I would use stories to encourage our teachers when the uncharted waters got choppy. Stories helped us stay true to a focus on learning, humble collaboration, and treating students the way with the care that we would wish for our own kids. Hopefully hearing our story will encourage you today. I will leave you with a quote that I shared with our staff in the midst of some of the changes I have described today. The quote is from basketball coach John Wooden, and while his record of wins is astounding, I am more in awe of how he brought people together to lift each other up. He says, "You can do nothing about tomorrow. It is yet to come. However, tomorrow is in large part determined by what you do today. So make today a masterpiece. You have control over that." Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Brian Griggs, for your wonderful speech. Every one of us should remember this. We needed to know the why before the what or the how. 非常感谢布拉恩·格里戈斯先生的精彩报告，让我们每个人铭记于心。先要知道为什么，再弄清是什么和怎么做。Distinguished experts, dear colleagues and friends, so far you have listened to 24 speeches focusing on redefining learning from 31 speakers, 14 countries. That's all for the academic forum of the 6th Annual Conference of K-12 Education Research Association. The closing ceremony is coming soon. Take a break and see you later. 尊敬的各位专家、教育界的同仁们以及关心教育的朋友们，至此，来自全球14个国家31位专家校长为大家奉献了24场以重新定义学习为主题的精彩报告。感谢大家的参与学习。稍后我们将进行全球基础教育研究联盟第6届年会的闭幕式。你想知道这次会议取得的共识是什么吗？明年第7届年会的主题又是什么呢？1刻钟以后，敬请大家继续观看。
尊敬的各国参会嘉宾、女士们、先生们，大家好！现在我们举行全球基础教育研究联盟第6届年会闭幕式。会议第1项议程：观看联盟年会的视频短片。让我们一起来回顾一下本届年会的精彩瞬间。本届年会是我们在全球新冠肺炎疫情的特殊背景下，以网络视频方式召开的一次线上会议。各国的参会嘉宾围绕着重新定义学习这个主题，共同分享、对话交流，取得了丰硕的成果。这次会议也得到了中国教育同仁和社会各界的高度关注和支持。通过中国教研网和河北新闻网全程直播，线上观看的人数达到了63.01万人。相信每一位参会者都会收获颇多。让我们感谢每一位主题报告的嘉宾带给我们的分享和贡献，也感谢所有线上参会者给予大会的支持和配合。现在进行会议第2项议程，有请河北省科技厅党组副书记、副厅长、河北省外专局局长郭玉明先生讲话。 大家欢迎。
尊敬的新智校长、各位来宾、先生们、女士们，大家上午好。在这金风送爽、硕果飘香的美好时节，我们今天以线上的方式相聚在石家庄外国语教育集团，隆重举行全球基础教育研究联盟第6届年会，共叙友谊，共话发展。这是基础教育领域的一件盛事。在此，我仅代表河北省科技厅、河北省外国专家局对此次活动的圆满举办表示衷心的祝贺，对来自各个国家和省内外学者专家的辛勤付出表示衷心的感谢。本次大会立意高，学术性强，它必将给全球基础教育带来借鉴意义。会议期间，有36位校长和专家围绕重新定义学习这个主题进行了主旨和主题发言，分享了成功的经验、行之有效的具体做法，以及我们共同面临的问题与挑战。各位专家的经验一定会成为全球教育界宝贵的财富。百年大计，教育为本，教育是立国之本、强国之基。教育事业的发展是关乎国家和民族未来的长远大计，对于实现中华民族伟大复兴的中国梦、全面建设社会主义现代化的国家意义深远。近年来，河北省立足新发展阶段，应对新发展形势，打造新发展优势，积极融入国家重大战略，传播华夏文化，吸纳世界文明，以灵活多样的方式引进外国高端人才，不断完善人才引进体制机制，大力提升外国人才管理服务工作水平，促进了河北省与世界各国各地区的人才交流、友好合作。特别是石家庄外国语教育集团率先实践，通过文化的交流、教育合作等方式，为我省引才引智、文化繁荣服务，为河北打造优秀人才集聚高地做出了积极贡献。此次活动可以说人才积累、智慧云集，它不仅是一场国际的教育盛会，更搭建了沟通友谊的桥梁。希望石家庄外国语教育集团以此次活动为契机，进一步发挥品牌优势，围绕新形势下我省引进外国人才和治理的各项工作，创新对接方式，广纳海外贤才，为经济强省、美丽河北建设集聚更多的优秀海外人才智力。河北省外国专家局也将一如既往地关注石家庄外国语教育集团的国际人才交流与合作，在引智渠道、人才引进、项目合作以及重大活动上等给予大力支持。今天，全球基础教育研究联盟第6届年会即将闭幕，再次感谢各位专家和朋友们给予的大力支持，希望下次年会再聚会。谢谢大家。
感谢郭厅长的讲话，也衷心感谢河北省教育科技厅多年来对全球基础教育研究联盟的大力支持和帮助。现在进行会议第3项议程，受联盟理事会的委托，下面我宣读联盟第2届理事会第2次会议决议。2021年11月1日，全球基础教育研究联盟召开了第2届理事会第2次会议，经过认真研究、充分讨论，形成决议如下：一、讨论确定在本届年会闭幕式上发布联盟第6届年会共识，即来自全球基础教育研究联盟第6届年会的声音：新学习，创造未来的力量。二、一致同意新增英国公众教育集团为全球基础教育研究联盟会员学校。截止目前，联盟的会员校共有来自中国、美国、英国、加拿大、澳大利亚、新西兰、瑞典、丹麦、意大利、日本、俄罗斯、新加坡、罗马尼亚、哥斯达黎加、卡塔尔、西班牙、 等16个国家的128所学校。3、研究确定全球基础教育研究联盟第7届年会的召开时间为2022年10月19日至20日。会议的主题为校长对教师的领导力。在当今这个智能时代、信息社会，教师的成长与发展面临许多新挑战。校长如何引导教师？如何引领教师？如何服务教师？如何激励教师？如何评价教师？都是值得我们认真思考和探讨的问题。宣读完毕，谢谢。接下来呢，我们抓紧来落实理事会决议的有关事项。我们将以电子邮件的形式把会员证书发送给联盟新增的会员校英国公众教育集团。在此也祝愿我们全球基础教育研究联盟的队伍越来越壮大，吸纳更多的新学校加入联盟。现在进行会议第4项议程，有请石家庄外国语学校党总支副书记李红霞女士宣读全球基础教育研究联盟第6届年会共识。
来自全球基础教育研究联盟第6届年会的声音，新学习创造未来的力量。我们来自中国、美国、英国、加拿大、日本、俄罗斯、巴西、法国、新西兰、丹麦、德国、意大利、哥斯达黎加、卡塔尔等14个国家的全球基础教育研究联盟第6届年会的31名与会者，于2021年11月1日至3日，跨越全球疫情阻隔，齐聚云端，围绕重新定义学习主题，展开了全球对话，就后疫情时代的学习方式变革、重新定义教与学、学习形态的变革等共同关切的话题达成一致共识。世界在变，教育也必须做出改变。社会无处不在经历着深刻的变革，而这种变革呼唤着新的教育形式，培养着今日、明日社会经济所需要的能力。这意味着超越识字、算术，聚焦学习环境和新的学习方法，以促进公平正义、社会平等和全球团结。重新定义学习的概念，学会如何学习从来没有像今天这么重要。知识广泛的理解为通过学习获得的信息、理解、技能、价值观和态度。学习是为了获得这种知识的过程，学习既是过程，也是这个过程的结果，既是手段，也是目的，既是个人行为，也是集体努力。获取何种知识，以及为什么，在何时，在何地，如何使用这些知识，是个人成长和社会发展的基本问题。学习即对话，在社会变革、信息激增、人工智能、移动互联网的大背景下，新时代的学习已经来临。学习正在突破传统的时空、内容、方式和路径局限，迈向全新的目标、新范式、新境界。学习作为一种社会经验，需要与他人共同完成，以及通过与同伴和老师进行讨论及辩论的方式来实现。所以，学习要重视过程，要和老师、同学对话，和外部世界对话，要了解外部世界，和大自然对话，了解大自然，和大自然融为一体。学习是人应对不确定性未来的一项基本能力和权利，是参与和促进社会可持续发展的重要基石。学校应培养学生面向未来的学习能力， 为学生提供安全、富有创造力的学习环境，使学生成为自主设计的终身学习者。社会应为其成员提供充分的学习机会和学习资源，构建更加完善的学习体系。学习不仅是个体行为，更是全球化时代人类一项共同的事业。教育是指导人们如何阅读世界的最重要的工具。教育是全球共同利益，共同行动是共同利益本身所固有的，并且有助于共同利益。每个人的观点都有价值，每个人都可以为教育这一崇高的使命而努力工作。积极应对学习变革的挑战，探索学校服务学生学习需求的使命，推进更广泛的国际教育合作，培养学生应对未来的学习力，是全球基础教育研究联盟各成员单位以及全世界各国家和地区教育工作者的努力目标，是推进学校合作、促进教育交流的共同选择。为此，我们提出如下倡议：一、树立新学习理念。学校要重新审视学习对学生个人、未来社会和世界的意义和价值，主动适应技术创新和全球疫情下的学习方式和途径的转变，构建丰富学生学习体验、提供安全、愉快、全纳的学习环境的服务体系，形成分享、合作、理解的学校学习文化。二、聚焦学习领导力培养。学校将培养学生持续不断的以及应对不确定性、复杂性未来的学习领导力作为学校教育的核心目标之一。通过变革学校教与学，使学生学会学习，擅长于合作学习、深度学习和自组织学习，并成为自主评估和设计自我学习的人。三、创新学习服务体系和路径。学校要构建服务于学生全面发展的学习服务体系，积极构建新的学习空间，迈向学习空间网络，加强线上线下教学的有机结合，为学生提供新的学习工具，为培养学生借助学习工具自主选择学习内容、学习方向以及目标，完成自我评估，为学生的可持续发展奠定基础。同时，我们要运用线上教学优势，支持和促进不同地区学生的共同学习，共享优质教育资源。学校要为学生提供职业导向性的学习过程以及技能性的学习过程，激发学生的内驱力，给学生提供机会以及多样性的职业选择，帮助学生发现自己，从小开始思考自己未来发展的方向。四、优化学习评价。学校要重新定义学生的学习结果和效果，基于学习力指标，构建以未来发展为导向的新的学习评价指标体系，使学生成为具有自我评估能力的学习者，为学生成为基于问题解决的终身学习者提供教学支持。五、为未来培养真正的学习者。再没有比教育和学习更为强大的变革力量，它可以为所有人建设更加美好的未来。学校的全部教育应为实现有意义的终身学习而教，培养学生成为创造未来社会的学习者，成为构建人类命运共同体的学习者，成为建设未来美好生活的学习者。这既是学校教育的追求，也是学校教育的责任。我们希望全球基础教育研究联盟在促进人类学习和学习变革过程中，积极开展广泛的对话、交流与合作，为各国学生发展服务。这也正是我们本届年会的主题：重新定义学习的意义所在，既让我们满怀憧憬，又鼓舞人心，对话未来。谢谢。
好，谢谢李书记。本届年会共识是在联盟学术委员会专家的精心指导下，广泛征求参会嘉宾的意见和建议，经过理事会会议认真研究、充分讨论后确定发布的，集中体现了会议期间每一位发言嘉宾主题报告的精华，是联盟会议对重新定义学习发出的共同声音。联盟会员学校将在今后的工作中努力付诸行动。至此，今天闭幕式的议程已经全部完成。我代表全球基础教育研究联盟理事会以及全体会员学校，衷心感谢学术委员会的专家以及各级领导对联盟的支持和帮助，也再次感谢所有的参会嘉宾。明年联盟第7届年会的邀请函将由联盟秘书处在2022年的2月底之前发出，请大家关注全球基础教育研究联盟的网站信息和联络方式，让我们保持密切联系。本届年会的信息和成果都会在联盟网站上进行发布。为了更好的传播和分享联盟年会的成果，本届年会发布的全球化背景下学生领导力的培养蓝皮书，我们将根据参会嘉宾所在的学校和区域的需求，在会后邮寄。请有需求的嘉宾将所需要的数量和邮寄的地址发到联盟的秘书处。最后，我宣布全球基础教育研究联盟第6届年会圆满闭幕，让我们明年再相聚。闭幕式至此结束，谢谢大家，再见。